the more you're able to deal with stress, I'm gonna walk you through how I do it, the more successful you'll be. It's just bar none, straight out, flat out. That is a truth. If you cannot deal with stress, you will have an insanely hard time being able to be successful as an entrepreneur, okay?
What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Carrot Cast. Now, the Carrot Cast, we're usually diving in doing interviews with amazing real estate investors, amazing real estate agents. Now, in these episodes, every Thursday, they're the Trevor Truck Talks, where you get to hear behind the scenes of the mindset shifts I'm going through as a CEO of one of the fastest growing companies in America, and the mindset shifts you can take to run your business and win back your freedom as well. Let's dive into this episode.
Guys, in this Trevor Truck Talk Carrotcast episode, I'm going to talk about stress. I'm going to talk about how to manage stress more effectively, how to actually use stress for your advantage, and how over the years I've had to just really process stress completely differently. So if you are stressed, if you get stressed often, if you get stressed easily, or if someone that you know is that way, I'm going to talk about how to kind of reposition stress and some different ways to think about it, I think. So first of all, guys, I want to tell you the kind of situation that spurred me to pick up the phone as I'm driving in town from my house to the office to talk about stress. This past couple of weeks I've been on vacation, and a week ago I was on full vacation up in the mountains at the lake cabin. This week I'm in Roseburg, and I'm still working 3 to 4 hours a day, but no meetings. I wanted to try an experiment this week to say, hey, what if I still worked, but I had no meetings? And would that lead to a more enjoyable work week? Would that actually lead to me being able to move forward the important things better? And throughout this week, we've been doing some things with our downtown building, our renovation projects, and those historical properties I've talked about over the past 6 to 12 months. And there's some things that have been kind of stopping them. And then we had an inspector come in to inspect some of the work that one of our tenants had done. And the tenant, they did a great job, but there's a couple things out of her control that got the inspection to not pass. And it was out of our control as well. When we bought the building, we inherited some kind of quirks in the building, and they were all approved, they're all permitted and everything, but the county doesn't have good notes on it. So they're like coming to us saying, hey, you guys have to prove that there's a 90-minute firewall here, when we know that there is. We know the person who did it. We know the engineer who did all the work. But the county just doesn't have records on it for some reason, which is crazy, right? Because they're the ones who approved it, and it got fully passed about 12 years ago. Before we owned it. And so the reason I bring this up is our tenant got massively stressed out at that moment, like massively stressed out. She was lashing out at people. And I don't want to place any blame on her. She had a really tough day in other reasons as well. So it kind of all came down on her. And that's very normal and very natural for a lot of us, when a lot of different things kind of come down on you and you're not sure where you should put that attention. And so then all of a sudden things just break, and we've all done it, right? And also I was at home in between those different things, and there's the inspector came by and they tried to test like one of the exit alarms, and my wife's getting calls from the building owner next to us who owns a restaurant saying, hey, we're hearing these fire alarms all day, and we weren't able to put people over here in the restaurant, and we're losing business. And we're like, it's not our problem, it's the things on your side of the building, but let's work together to solve it. And anyway, for hours, the two different people down there downtown haven't been able to solve them. And so it really started to stress out my wife as well. And sometimes I'm going to kind of walk through the way I process things like this, and also a couple quotes that I think you really help you. So the first quote I'm going to talk about is from Naval Ravikant. And I've read this one before. You guys should definitely go Google Naval, Naval, Ravikant, Ravicant, I think it is. And then just type up like Naval Ravikant on stress or something. He's got a lot of great little 30-second, 2-minute snippets. So this one here, let's first, guys, define what is stress and why is it so important that us as entrepreneurs, we have to deal with stress. Well, before I define stress, I want to kind of lay out why it's so important for you to deal with stress differently than the general population. Okay, the people who are the most successful that I know are able to deal with things, bigger stressful situations more easily. The more successful the person that I know, the more they can deal with stress. The more that you reposition stress as a challenge, as something that isn't all that important, as something that you can tackle, it's worth tackling, not worth having it tackle you. And as I've grown as an entrepreneur, things that maybe would have elicited a stress reaction in me a decade ago don't even faze me anymore. And it's kind of interesting because when you're around someone who hasn't learned how to deal with stress at the higher level yet, they can oftentimes see the way that I deal with those situations that they see as stressful, and I'm like, this isn't stressful. It's just a challenge we can go solve. It oftentimes has elicited a reaction towards me of, you must not care about this. I'm like, no, I care about it. It's just not worth getting worked up on, right? It's not that important in the overall scheme of life, or even to my life today, to get worked up on it. Okay, and so the more you're able to deal with stress, I'm gonna walk you through how I do it, the more successful you'll be. It's just bar none, straight out, flat out. That is a truth. If you cannot deal with stress, you will have an insanely hard time being able to be successful as an entrepreneur. Okay, so let me read this from Naval. Naval says, stress is an inability to decide what's important at the macro level. Okay, stress is the inability to decide what's important. You want two incompatible things at once. Okay, guys, think about this. You want two things that don't work together at the same time. In physical terms, stress happens when something wants to be in two places at the same time. If I apply pressure to both ends of an iron beam, right, I can create stress on the beam because one part wants to be north and the other part wants to be south, right? If you've got something holding it very, very tightly in the middle, and you apply pressure in one direction on one side and the other direction on the other side, and they're not working together, then it creates stress on the beam. And what happens when there's stress on the beam? It actually can fracture it, it can break it, it can dampen the integrity of the beam to do its job. And the same thing happens with us. When we let things get stressed too much, it dampens our ability to do the job, right? And so when we start to think about stress once again, how can we react to it differently? Well, the first thing is, like what Naval said, is it's the inability to decide what's important. So in this situation with the county inspectors and the fire alarm going off for hours and hours and impacting the restaurant next door and all this kind of stuff, as we're getting those phone calls, I'm like, okay, let's make some phone calls and see. And what Naval mentions in his podcast is, he says, at some point, you can make the decision that something isn't important enough to stress you out. So in some form, you actually have control over your stress, okay? Just like with the iron beam, if I, instead of choosing to try to press the iron beam in two different directions that were competing, what if I just said, this other direction over here isn't important anymore, I'm just gonna press this one? The stress goes away. The stress immediately goes away when you choose to stop pressing it in this direction over here. I'm only gonna press it in this one direction because that's the only one that's important right now, okay? And so same thing with this situation. When it was, when someone reached out to me, it was very stressful for the tenant, very stressful for my wife as well. And I looked at it, I was like, well, it's not like, let's look at this in the whole scheme of things. Okay, number one, is this going to get passed? Yes. Okay, number two, what's the worst case scenario? Worst case scenario is we've got to pay a little bit of extra money and have something happen. Okay, so that's the worst case scenario, right? Which it would suck, but it's the worst case scenario. So I'm going, okay, I can accept that worst case scenario. I can accept that worst case scenario. So number three was, okay, is there anything in my control that I can do to solve this? And so I literally walked down the street to the engineer's office, who I knew did the work. And I said, hey, Tom, how you doing? I heard you did the engineering work in this project about 12 years ago. He said, yes, I did. And I explained to him the situation. And he said, oh, great, I've got the paperwork for it. I just need to go find it. And so he's finding that paperwork. So I'm like, sweet. I did what I could do in my control, which was go talk to people and see what they could do that is in their control. As soon as I did that, I was able to move the ball forward, and stress, was continuing to stay away. Now it's fully out of my control. And so the next thing I did is I said, well, let's call up the county and say, hey, county, shouldn't you have better records? Like, what is in your guys' control? You're trying to put everything on us. What's in your guys' control that you guys can resolve this situation with us and for us? And so I held them accountable, and they're working on that on their side when they were trying to be lazy before that. And so I'm looking at this as cool, out of my control. I'm not the county. I can't control what they can do. We did everything that we needed to do, and now it's in their hands. Stress away. I'm completely thinking about something else. But where a lot of people will get caught up in is they're going to continue to think about that thing. It's going to grind on them because they're trying to be in two places at once. They're trying to be in the spot of actively solving this situation, and they're trying to be in the spot of doing the other things that they actually want to do with their time versus trying to solve this problem. Okay. And so I immediately exited that situation and said, I've done what I can do. It's out of my control. I don't have stress in this situation at all. I'm going to go do what I want to do now. Okay. And then I'll revisit it in a day or two or whenever it is when that happens. Okay. And so the same situation, guys, when you're looking at stress in your lives, why is it that you're stressed out? Is it because you actually want to be with your family rather than working? Is it because you actually want to be working rather than with your family? Right? You're stressed out because you know you need to get this project done, or you have the seller meeting to go to, or whatever it is, but you also have a commitment to your family and you're stressed out. You feel like you're that beam that's getting pushed in two different directions and you're not sure what to do about it. Okay, so you feel a stress in that moment, and we all feel that. Where we committed to our spouse that we're going to be home at 6 o'clock, and we also made a commitment to someone else for a 5:30 meeting, being really optimistic, and then all of a sudden you know that you're not going to get home at 6 o'clock on time. And so you're stressed out because now you're trying to be in two places at once and it doesn't work. They're incompatible. You cannot be in that meeting and get in your vehicle and go home and be home at 6 o'clock at the same time. That's probably my nemesis, is being too ambitious and too optimistic about what I'm able to accomplish during a day. So I overcommit to two different people at once. So that's what I need. That's what I need to work on. That's pretty much usually when I have stress. Now, it kind of goes back to the original definition that we talked about, that Naval mentions, where stress is the inability to be able to determine what's important, to determine what's priority. So if that's the case, if I have that meeting and I committed to my wife to be home at 6 o'clock, then that was my inability to determine that meeting either was more important than me showing up at 6 o'clock. And so then I need to make sure to adjust my commitment to my wife and maybe make it 6:30. Or I make the commitment the other way, which is the correct way, to say this meeting is less important than my commitment to my wife and my family, and I'm going to schedule that meeting at a different time, right? And so that's the thing that I'm working on, that I want to continue to work on. That's really pretty much the only time I get stressed out right now, is if I overcommitted and I didn't process what was actually the most important. And I used my optimism and positivity to think I could get it all done at once. And so I want to toss this challenge to you. Are you stressed? Have you been stressed? If you have been stressed, why is it that you have been stressed? Okay. And it's likely because you are trying to do two things at once. You're trying to be in two locations at the same time that are incompatible. And you have control. You have some sort of control over the stress because you can choose to not be in one of those locations anymore. You can choose that one of those locations is more important than the other location, and that you need to make an adjustment so that other location is not in the picture anymore. Okay, you can choose to make those adjustments in your life to remove that stress. So you have control over this, y'all. And the more that you're able to deal with it, the more that you're able to confront stress in that way, the better that you're going to actually be able to show up as an entrepreneur, show up as a friend, show up as a husband, show up as a wife, show up as a contributor to your society, show up as an entrepreneur and a business person. Okay. So I want to challenge you in this season where we're going through some economic changes. We're going through some real estate market changes. Your business might be changing. You might be having some challenges. You might be having some situations where you don't know how to deal with them. You might be going home more often than not, feeling stressed out and wondering if this business thing is worth it. Or you might be going home stressed out that you feel like you're not giving the business what it needs and you're taking that time away from your family and you're feeling bad about that. Or you may be feeling like, man, I need to adopt a hobby, but I can't pull away from work because I feel guilty of pulling away from work because my employees are working their butt off. What are they going to think of me if I pull away from work? So you feel stress. And so if you feel those moments, once again, ask yourself this: am I trying to be in two places at once? The odds are you are. Number two, ask yourself what's higher priority of these two items. Get clarity for yourself which one's higher priority, and then decide what to do with the other one. Either say no to it so that eliminates the stress, it stops the pressure on the beam, or number two, change the timing of it. Okay, so it happens after this thing or it happens before, it doesn't conflict with it, and that eliminates the stress. And then number three is, guys, recognize, like I said, that you do have some level of power over stress, and you can decide at some point that once something's out of your control, you can just let it go. And I think that's one of the biggest issues that a lot of people have when they hang on to stress, is there's something out of their control and they don't let it go. There's something out of their control and they don't know how to deal with it. There's something out of their control and they're hanging on to it like it's something they can control. Do whatever you can do to solve the problem, but then let it go. Let it go. Okay? Now at that point, like, when this happened, my wife was really stressed out about it. They're getting calls. I'm off today. I'm like, hey, babe, I can drive down there. And she's like, I'm getting text messages left and right. She's stressed out. She has some things for the school board that she's trying to tackle. I'm like, babe, what can I help with? You know, what's most important? And I said, let me just take this one away from you. And babe, this is out of your control. You can't do anything about it. You don't have any of the answers. We've already tried everything that we know to do. And so I said, the one thing I can control is I can drive down there. And I could have called a handyman, I could have done these things, but I wanted to solve the problem for my wife right then, so there wasn't any more communication. I said, I can drive down there and I can walk around that building, try to find the alarm, see if it's in our building, see if it's in the building next door, and then I'll work with them to solve the problem. I don't know the answer, but I can control getting my butt in my truck and driving down there and looking. And like I said, that's not my normal process. You know, I've got 50-something employees. And so I'm usually able to find an amazing team member to go tackle things like this. This definitely is not $10,000 an hour work that a CEO of a multi-8-figure year business should be doing. But on my day off, it was most important for me to solve that stress for my wife, so she could have an amazing rest of the day and rest of the week. And that, for me, removed the stress of everything else for me. There were other things I was wanting to do at home. There was other things I was wanting to do to kind of wrap a couple work things. And I said, you know what? It's not stressful for me anymore, because the most important thing is solving the situation for my wife so she can have peace about it. And it's something she hasn't really learned how to deal with stress at a high level yet, because she hasn't had to have these types of situations like I have. She hasn't had these opportunities to learn like I have. And so I'm down here going to look for a buzz in one of these buildings. I'm going to work with people to figure out what the heck's going on. So guys, process stress differently. Appreciate y'all. Guys, follow me on IG, trevor.mauch, trevor.mauch. Hit me with an IG DM. And guys, carrotcamp.com, Carrot Camp slots opened up. I already mentioned it. It might be sold out by now, but if not, you can go to carrotcamp.com, fill out an application. If you're able to fill out an application still, spots are open. We usually get dozens of applications for every Carrot Camp. We accept 15. Guys, carrotcamp.com. Next one, if you're listening to this before August 31st or September 1st of 2022, we have the $1 Million Meeting event in Dallas, Texas, that we are co-hosting with Mike Hambright of Investor Fuel, Investor Machine. Guys, go to milliondollarmeeting.co, milliondollarmeeting.co/carrot. And we're going to have the most amazing event down there, guys. Check it out, milliondollarmeeting.co/carrot.